Welcome to DAO Deep Dives, where we interview DAO founders, core DAO contributors, and everyone else who works on the periphery of decentralized autonomous organizations.
All right, hello, gentlemen. Very exciting episode
Hi.
today. As always, I say it every single time because they are always exciting. Today, we're talking to Quinn from Harmonic Guild about
Yep.
the intersection of Web3 and the music industry. I think
Yep.
that's how I would like to describe it. How's it going, Quinn?
That's going great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about the music industry and democratic companies and how to make the world a better place and get musicians paid.
Nice. So yeah, I'm excited to have you on and just dive into this. With that being said, introduce yourself and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm Quinn. I'm one of the co-founders of Harmonic Guild. We are a democratic, decentralized, autonomous company trying to build a platform to help musicians better promote and distribute their music and music video on the internet. Harmonic Guild sees that the music industry is deeply unequal and tech platforms have inserted themselves as intermediaries, and this has led to it being extremely difficult to make a living wage as a full-time musician. And we see this. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and so we see this in the economics of our town. And it's a problem we think that can be solved with coordination and some really good tech and just working together. And so we're building a protocol that can overcome some of these issues.
Amazing. Yeah, certainly not an easy task you guys set out to solve. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of this here throughout the episode. Before we go into that, we ask all of our guests, what is a DAO? And we'll let you answer that however you like. You have potentially an interesting definition for it. I hear already a slightly different acronym coming from you. So, yeah, what is a DAO to you, Quinn?
Part of the reason that we're going with democratic, decentralized, autonomous company is because a DAO is not specific enough for our purposes. It can mean a lot of different things. I think usually it means some kind of token-based voting organization with the agency of individuals. I think we view it from a technological lens, where tokenized voting is an institution that can lead to the decision making of an organization. That's the kind of fundamental technological layer of this thing. From an administrative and sort of regulation standpoint, companies have existed within the regulatory frameworks for a long time. And stock bearing companies were in the very beginning designed to be democratic. They have evolved to be undemocratic. And so we're taking a little bit of a middle path using the existing sort of prior art of the legal system while also enabling tokenized voting and autonomy of holding digital assets. Yeah, one of the things that tokenized voting enables is platforms to reconcile on a culture and reconcile on an economics and reconcile on their leadership in a way that is instantaneous and is unimpeachable. And that is an incredibly powerful structure for growing networks, right? When there's a reason I'm going to say protocol, I'm going to say platform, and I'm going to say economy when we're talking about what we're trying to build at Harmonic Guild, is because it is more complex. We're trying to make it more open than your kind of traditional tech company, right? Tech companies, as they stand today, are monopolistic enterprises. They're trying to maximize profit on the distribution of music and music video. Harmonic is taking a different approach. It's something that's more akin to what you would find as like a union. And and we think that kind of revolutionary mindset in the structure of an organization is necessary to beat Google and Spotify. They've got billions of dollars to throw at the problem, and we're just like some nerds all over the world and some cool kids at bars who are singing. And in order to do that, we think we have to do something that is revolutionarily different. Our governance is part of it, but there's other components of it. Transparency, which is enabled by the blockchain, and progressive values in terms of promoting, both in a gender and racial construct and globalization construct, but also within the ins and outs of who has a label deal and who doesn't. Lifting up, it's a system, it's a structure that's built from the ground up, not going to be built from the top down. give you a second to ask a question.
Yeah, no, this is going right toward what we were going to ask next. You touched on it in bits and pieces. On a high level, give us a glimpse into what Harmonic is and will be, and why are you passionate about that intersection of Web3 and music?
Sure. So our North Star is always getting musicians paid. They are underpaid as it stands. No one is making a living off of streaming except for the top 1/10 of 1%. So that's our North Star. That is a difficult thing to do. We have to change the way that music and music video are distributed on the internet. In order to get there, we're tapping into the promotion of music and building sort of simple applications that help musicians and music adjacents like promoters and managers promote their material, whatever it is around music. Apparel is incredibly important. Promote yourself in however you see fit. If you got a new single, promote your new single. And that's with sort of simple landing pages, all with decentralized front ends. So you actually own the material, right? You're not relying on Harmonic Guild servers beyond some deployment stuff, all enabled by Near's Boss, Near blockchain operating system, to build those kinds of pages and also eventually connect into this sort of decentralized internet that allows for the pass through of intellectual property and data through decentralized means. As it gets to distribution, it is a similar playbook that you might expect, eyes and ears to music. So we're using decentralized file storage systems, we're using smart contract systems for payments, but the user experience is somewhat similar. You just go to a page and view it. One of the ways in which it is protocolized is Harmonic. We don't want to send anyone to obviously go to harmonicguild.io, but we're not trying to send people to harmonicguild.io to view music and media. Like, who are we? We're trying to also give promoters and tastemakers and influencers, capacity to make money off of the promotion that they're doing. So they receive a royalty as well on the consumption of music that happens through we call it a gateway, whatever their applet is that is used for the viewing of music and music video.
Yeah, I'm going to just take the perspective of a musician that's up and coming and listening to this podcast and saying, oh, this is pretty interesting. I want to figure out how to use this thing or look into it a bit. So, on that point that you were just mentioning, actually, before I lose that, this is like a plug-in. Basically, I would go to a site of a band or something that I already really appreciate and be able to engage directly there with your technology instead of having to go to Harmonic Guild?
Yeah, so a band can run a gateway. We try to make running a gateway, running a front end as easy as possible. Obviously, we're going to build them for other people because like connecting it to your domain for your website is already too confusing for most people, which is fine. It's confusing for me too. We'll build those sites, build those promotional sites to allow people to do it. And if another organization, an external team, wants to come in and plug into our infrastructure, great. We'll split a royalty with you just like we would any other person participating in the system. That's part of the way that it's protocolized. But you are right in that a could display this player on their page to play their own music as well as play other music that is part of the network or music generally, and then they do receive a royalty for being the person that does the distribution of the music, and it's all connected on a decentralized backend.
Cool. Let's talk about the process though. So I am on the website, right? And I want to click here, go ahead and get started. It really brings me currently to the Harmonic General Inquiry form, right?
Sure.
And allows me to fill out some information. What exactly is your process? What happens, after somebody goes through that?
Yeah. And so we think of ourselves as an agency, right? So we don't want to take a community and just throw them all into a Telegram group. We're trying to have you have a personal relationship with someone who's part of Harmonic Guild so that we can get your feedback and build something that you like. And this is everything from aesthetics to actual features of what it looks like. And so we do just want to talk to you, right? We're doing tons of outreach, sending tons of emails, LinkedIn DMs to investors and podcast hosts. We obviously want to connect with you. If you are tech savvy, you can go to gateway.harmonicguild.io, and that will show you our sort of implementation of a decentralized front end that has the capacity to do things like mint tokenized IP, mint a song. I'm over buzzwording here. I'm sorry. Mint a song or create one of this sort of our early beta of these promotional front ends. You can get an airdrop of an NFT, the kind of infrastructural beginnings of the infrastructure that's required to build this obviously very complex protocolized system of music distribution.
All right. But yeah, I was just checking out that additional site you had mentioned. And obviously, it is for the more savvy. I'm a crypto native,
Yeah.
but what kind of links and stuff go in here? So I would imagine this is going to get more user friendly and more in the front of what's actually going from the homepage at some point soon.
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why right now it's a conversation to build custom sites and custom implementations, because
Yep.
there is a limit to decentralized front ends as it stands. Also, it's just not totally put together yet, right? We're still building this. Good UX, especially with crypto, is more difficult than it is in a lot of other places.
Mhm.
And we're building some of the very important sort of first layer infrastructure building blocks that are used for these kinds of things, right? So we just built a relayer that allows us to pay your transaction fees while you still being the wallet owner. So you don't actually have to own any crypto to move some data to the blockchain to create your promotional website. And that is one of the steps on the way to getting it, where you can go to a concert and you can point your phone at a QR code, collect an NFT, upload some data to the blockchain, and have never had to be financially onboarded or never have had to write down your key phrase. You can do all that stuff after the fact. And that's what's needed in order to grow like a network, to be able to grow the onboarding of musicians and slash entrepreneurs, which are people in the music business who obviously will wear multiple hats.
Yeah, I think the second part of that is something that I hear a lot, right? Account abstraction is a major thing happening now to make it more friendly and onboard more people. And really, this is just improving the UX overall. But the first thing you said is actually something I don't hear a lot of folks talk about, which is like without the need to be financially onboarded. That's really interesting, right? So, look, just point your phone at this QR code, and then it automatically logs you into this thing, and you have your first NFT, and you didn't even know it hit you. You're like an NFT holder now, right? So that's really fantastic. I applaud you for working on that.
Yeah, if you look at our main landing website, the word blockchain is nowhere on
Right.
it. Or if it's on there, it's on there once. For when we're talking to a not in the weeds every day talking about DAO's audience, we try to abstract it as much as we can to simplify it in terms of transparency, not a decentralized ledger, ownership, not autonomy. We're trying to abstract a lot of that out.
So let's say I'm a musician. What problem exactly is Harmonic Guild solving for me as a musician? Let's help people experience a paradigm shift around that.
Problem is really simple. If you're a musician, you are being underpaid, and you're being underpaid on purpose by monopolistic tech companies that are maximizing profit from your art. Content is a word for art that makes money for somebody else. The way that audio and video are distributed is deeply unequal. And that is what we're trying to solve. And that is an incredibly economy wide problem that we're trying to solve. And we're just trying to give you, to start, we're just trying to give you things that will make your life a little bit easier. Landing pages, a little bit of data intelligence, a way to collect emails from your fans, QR codes that you don't have to pay for, to accept Venmo tips when you're playing at a bar. Solve the simple things, solve them well, talk to you while we work on building what we think is going to be a somewhat complex solution to solving the economy wide problem of the distribution, underpay and the distribution of music and music video.
On your website, it says the Harmonic Technology Guild is a democratic, decentralized, autonomous company. The Harmonic Technology Guild is integrated with the Delaware LLC, Harmonic Guild LLC. Walk us through that
Yes.
a little bit. I think a lot of legal thinking has gone into the structuring of your current makeup of the DAO slash LLC.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to do it. There are a lot of legal ways to do it. There are a lot of probably illegal ways that it is being done or has been done. We think that the sort of classical company structure and the legal frameworks and standing regulations associated with that are good enough to be preserved within our structure. Things like rights for minority owners. Delaware has the system where if you get 51%, you can't just throw out the other 49%. Those are things that have been argued about since the 1790s and in English common law well before that. Our structure is trying to leverage that while also making it fast and easy, right? Yeah, and that is all through tokenization and tokenized voting. And so the way it's been devised, and these things might change. Everything is we're building the plane while we're flying it, while we're building the airports. So our structure, as it stands, is a Delaware LLC that is owned by any partner that's over a certain percentage of ownership. That Delaware LLC is essentially beholden and instructed based on our operating agreement to do whatever is decided based on the voting of the decentralized organization and its membership units. So the membership units between the LLC and the membership units between the that we have in what we call the DDAC are more or less equivalent, but they are not exactly equivalent. Anything that is an autonomous operation, the execution of a smart contract, the operation of a DAO wallet, those things are operated through the decentralized tokenized means. The LLC is really only supposed to interact and operate when something has gone awry or there is a debate about whether or not something is legal. So, say there were a governance attack because we had a floating point operator in the NEP 20 smart contract. There's so many possible vectors of attack for decentralized organizations. That would be a case where the LLC would say, okay, let's reset this thing. We'll issue new tokens. So these things are possible. And that's to give us a bunch of flexibility to maintain legal compliance without a shadow of a doubt, in our opinion, and effectively incentivize our members and make it so that we can grow. And maybe to inject, this is not financial or legal advice, or to inject these things. We're planning to do these things. Like, it's a system. If not everything is built, come join us, help us build it.
So DDAC came up a
DDAC.
couple times now. Why DDAC, and how is a DDAC more specific than a DAO? I think you said in the beginning DAO wasn't specific enough for you guys for what you needed. How did you come to DDAC?
We are a company, not just an organization. It's possible maybe we'll be a structured collective someday, or something like a B Corp or something like that. But we think it's important for the management and signing contracts with other organizations to be clear that we are a company. The autonomous is shared, personal agency of the members as they participate, and that ownership being defined in wallets and tokens, either fungible or non-fungible. And decentralized we share, and democracy is the point for us, right? I think it's the point for a lot of DAOs. We think there are sometimes in a system like ours that has very different incentives that you might find in DeFi. We think that liquid fungible tokens or units of ownership have some perverse incentives that we don't necessarily want to deal with, because we're not doing kind of protocolized pass through or financialization in the way that you might with DeFi or earning interest or staking or something like that. Kind of liquidities, and we don't see that as a benefit. Obviously, being able to sell to the public is a big advantage. We don't necessarily see that as necessary. We want to build this from the ground up in certain types of ways. We're not trying to over financialize music beyond just distributing royalties. We're not doing investments in those kinds of ways.
I heard you say in an interview once, I think, fair pay for free music. Well, untangle that oxymoron for us.
Yeah, we mean free in the sense of free as in with liberty, but fair pay is important. And we are asking people to pay more for music. You can't pay artists more without asking consumers to pay more. If you ask me, well, how are you going to do that? Spotify already did that. Nobody was paying for music before Spotify. And now that it's possible to have a craft experience with the consumption of music, I think people should pay more for music. I am an avid music listener. My headphones don't leave my ears more than when I'm sleeping. I probably have 2 hours without my headphones on a day. So Spotify loses money on me. I'm in the rare in a rare breed in that sense. I value music more. I dedicated my life to it, obviously, but if you value music more, you should care that you do usually care that artists are making a living wage. You want to discover music that isn't in the mainstream, that isn't being promoted to you by the interests that are oftentimes served with the major streaming platforms. And free, these are artists being able to decide for themselves what the sort of both what is a fair rate for their music. We underestimate the extent, most people underestimate the extent to which Spotify and YouTube are the price setter for the streaming of music. And that is one of the things that is evidence in their monopolistic power. It's not a free market. It's not a free market because you cannot set your own price. And being able to set your own price is an incredibly important way to define the value of something for people to buy. They're not, and most of the times that price that they've set is zero. There are very few businesses where you're giving your product away for free. So yeah, we do think that having artists having the personal autonomy to decide for themselves what the price of their music is, to own the intellectual property of their music. If you're if you are putting your music on YouTube or any other platform, in most cases you are authorizing that platform to make an AI algorithm using your music. That is not something that Harmonic Guild will ever. And I get annoyed when venture capitalists say, you got to have your AI angle here about how you're going to use these royalties for AI. You're going to do the opposite because AI might be able to make great music, but they'll never be musicians. And musicians are who we want to support.
Quick follow up here on something you said,
Sure.
which reminded me discovering not promoted music yet, or finding something you might like that isn't discovered yet in the general sense, right? What's your thoughts on that? What comes to mind for me is from years ago, I don't know if they're still doing this, but like Pandora came out with their music genome algorithm, right? I'm sure there were still political incentives somewhere in between that company and delivering the music to me. But I think that's a very interesting space to play in, right? I would love to find just small musicians all around the country and the world which are playing things I might like. However, how you decide that is maybe that's where we do need the AI, right? Is that a place you Harmonic playing a role in at some point, or is that outside the scope?
It is somewhere we see ourselves playing a role in, and I cannot wait to get into music categorization and taxonomization algorithms someday in the weeds. I'm very excited for that. But as it stands right now, we're just trying to create a framework for someone else to make an algorithm. And that algorithm decides the order in which music is delivered to consumers. And a playlist is just a very rigorous algorithm in this case. And so there should be competition in these kind of channel providers, as are planning to call them, in the sorting of music that goes on the various channels. And that is the person who is most closely interacting with the price setting components of this. If a musician wants to charge 2 cents for a stream or 5 cents for a stream or have it be free, maybe the consumer is not the person to be interfacing with that decision making. That microtransactions are exhausting. We've seen that in video games. The playlist makers have more complete information and they can then plug into this decentralized structure.
So are music NFTs like a worthwhile innovation that Harmonic is focused on, or how does it music NFTs in general play into your platform?
Yeah, so in a couple different ways. The NFT is how somebody buys the access to the media. So a fan goes and buys the NFT, and that allows them to have a certain amount of access to the platform. That NFT is branded with the intellectual property of a musician that is one of our clients. So that is one of the two ways that NFTs here, or one of the three ways actually. I'll talk about how NFTs are employed here. The second way is the artists themselves mints an NFT that is the intellectual property, and that indicates their rights that they are holding for that intellectual property, as well as the royalties in both their ownership of that token, as well as in the streaming rights that they're providing for that token. There's a couple layers of smart contracts that we're planning on building into here. And the third way is a way to allow people who are not necessarily buying Harmonic NFTs to participate within the system. So if you're an external project and you're looking to work with Harmonic, we can provide your token additional utility by taking some of the funds that have been allocated for your token and allocating it to our financial pools. And then you can participate through your token, providing access to the distribution and consumption of music through our platform. That's another way in which we're decentralized.
In the music meets Web3 spectrum, what I've seen so far is more for what I would like to call like the hardcore fans, right? There is so the Death Bats Club, for example, from Avenged Sevenfold, is like your Bored Ape Yacht Club, but for a specific band, right? So it's fantastic in engaging your hardcore fans, giving them more, tying them more to your brand, and just, yeah, increase engagement and play in that world, right? Now, that's great for what it is, but do you see a way in which Harmonic can help break that down to and make something more accessible for the smaller artists that give them more exposure to someone like me, just a casual listener of many bands and genres?
Yeah, absolutely. Progressive promotion is a huge part of this. And you buying a collectible from an individual artist allows you access to view other artists, right? So some of the money from your purchasing of that NFT goes into the individual artist's pool. Some goes into the all other artists pool. And yeah, that's how you would get sort of progressively promoted other media. Relying on collectibles and sort of collectibilization of NFTs is useful if you're trying to create an all-encompassing community, and that can be really valuable. And there's a lot of great projects out there doing that. But Harmonic is just laser focused on viewing and consuming music and serving artists to help them help us and help us help them.
Awesome. So in a perfect world, just to break everything you talked about so far down one more time, would you say the goal is to replace the record labels and the Spotify's of this world with a more equitable solution for musicians and listeners?
So Spotify and YouTube, absolutely. The maximizing profit from the distribution of music is not the way to go. They've shown themselves to be, bad actors in one way or another. The labels, it's a bit more of a complicated conversation because a lot of people love their relationship with the labels. Do the big three put their thumb on the scale here and there? Absolutely. They absolutely do. But they're also helping musicians make money, which is the same goal that we have. So it's a bit of a give and take with labels, especially the big three labels. But we do think that we can democratize music in one way or another, either through transparency in dealings and transparency in contracting, as well as just distribution and finance.
So, how does Harmonic Guild compare to something like Bandcamp? And then in the Web3 space, something like Royal or Sound.xyz, right? Because those are two different approaches. And I think that Bandcamp maybe came out with really good intentions. We want to do this and allow musicians to unleash their own power and connect directly with fans. And then I think that Sound.xyz has taken a similar approach, but in the Web3 space and really focused on NFTs. Maybe how is a Harmonic Guild differentiating between those two approaches?
Yeah, I'm in some ways there are similarities between Bandcamp, but I think a better analogy in Web 2 is actually Patreon, which is these kind of subscriptions for access and subscriptions for extra videos. Like these things are in common. Where those centralized platforms fall short is that they can't grow into the openness of a network. You can't take your Patreon subscription to YouTube. That's just never going to happen. They're incentivized to actually do the opposite, to keep you on the platform for as long as possible. As far as the Web3 platforms, I never view us as competitors with anyone in Web3. If you are genuinely decentralized and building a music project, let's connect. Let's talk about how we can better this system. Your goals are the same as ours in most cases. Yeah, let's do it. Sound XYZ, which I'm more familiar with, they're doing great kind of collectible stuff, and Audius as well has some really cool stuff. But the way that Harmonic is focusing on the distribution of music and creating value in the pricing of music rather than adding an ever-ending set of utilities, which is a difficult thing. Trust me, we tried in the very beginning to continue to add utilities. These are, yeah, so that's how these projects can, how our project and existing Web3 solutions can interact is by cross-licensing intellectual property and doing the distribution. And if there's genuine decentralization, it shouldn't be that hard to plug it in. So we're looking forward to the kind of future of music that is decentralized in this way.
So cool. We're going to ask you a few kind of more fun questions, if you will.
Sure.
What's the best or worst take that you've heard regarding the intersection of Web3 and music?
Oh my gosh. I try to not talk ill about other projects. The best take is Harmonic Guild. We're going to be great. We have the solution. No, obviously, we're just trying to build consensus and get feedback and build something cool. And another thing that we don't do that I think is interesting is the financialization of the investment into artists. That's a really important democratizing how artists can get to the next level is really important because Harmonic Guild wants to make artists $50, a couple $100 a month, but it's really difficult unless you've got a big following, even at those streaming sort of wages to make a living. Investing in artists is an important thing, and there are a bunch of really cool projects who are doing that. It's outside of our wheelhouse, though. The worst take, I worry about liquid fungible tokens. I think the incentives for liquid fungible tokens and the ownership of those and staking incentives and profile picture style NFT collectibles. I just think that there are other better ways to solve this. And a lot of people who have those are working in that direction, but the passing of tokens are a tool. They're not they're not the goal. They're a mechanism. Spotify doesn't talk about their just-in-time database distribution of packets, right? Like we over talk about, and I have done this in this conversation right here. We over talk about the technology, where the technology is a tool. It's important to emphasize, especially to non-musician communities, why we are using these tools. These tools enable democratic platforms. These tools enable from the bottom up. They enable a better wage. They enable progressive promotion. Maybe it's not so important that we talk about and hype up NFTs, where the keyword that you're optimizing for is people typing in to Google NFT. Hot take, I guess.
So actually, I want to, before jumping to the next question, just riff on something here. Musicians have always hung out on the side of on the curb and then thrown a hat out or whatever. And then people walk by and they're like, I like this. And I'm going to sit here for a minute. And you sit here for a minute and then you get this value from them and you feel like putting a dollar into the cap thing. Like I've experienced this in every city, like ever. And a lot of musicians, I think, maybe make their living this way, just playing this Third Street Promenade, like in LA is probably one of the places I saw this a lot. Obviously Nashville. So that's interesting. Thinking about that specifically, and what is like the very modern version of that. What is the online version of that? And then another thing that I saw working was there's huge influencers, people in the Web3 space, such as Kobe, who was very regularly going into some of these like live streams and with musicians, and then just like sending a bunch of ETH to them, and then a bunch of other people would follow in and do the same thing, and then actually creating a fan base like inside of this live stream. So that's pretty interesting too, thinking about Harmonic Guild. If I was an NFT holder of a specific artist, it's really like this access pass and being able to join something and listen to this artist really play a show to me and a small amount of other holders, like in a more private setting. That's really exciting. I hope that is what's happening on Harmonic Guild. And just thinking about that is something I want to participate in.
Yeah, that was maybe 3 questions, so let me try to get to them. Busking is obviously super important. There are a few places in the world where a guitar and a dream come outside and maybe you'll strike it big. That's a goal where that's part of our goals to make that possible. And QR codes and Venmo and centralized pay apps are an important part of that economy as it stands right now, both out on the street corner as well as like in bars and stuff like that. As far as we definitely want to provide a craft experience for music, but I don't think we like thrive on exclusivity. Like exclusivity is just a way to get people to pay for the experience of music. Like we're not trying to keep anyone out. Musicians don't normally try to keep anyone out. If the venue is big enough, we'll let them in. But yeah, it can be. We also don't necessarily focus on live streaming as well. Live streaming and also like direct engagement with fans is oftentimes very tiring for musicians. We are taking very seriously our conversation about how much access we want our tokens to allow fans to musicians, because musicians are tired of posting a ton. They're tired of engaging. Oftentimes, they're tired of engaging with their community. They're like, they just want to play. They just want to play music and have you listen, and that should be enough. The over communityification of music is also something that can be really challenging for musicians. And that's, we want to provide an off ramp. If you want to engage, you want to have tokenized Telegram channels, that's great. And if you want to do that, we can help find a partner, we can help coordinate that, or you can build it yourself if you want. But if you just want to like listen to music, that's what we're here for, and that's what we're trying to build.
All right. So we're in our parachutes. We're landing now. We can go to another fun question that we ask a lot
Sure.
of our guests, which is, where do we go from here 10x? In your case, it's not necessarily where are we 10x in the DAO space, but very specifically, where are we DDAC space?
Harmonic is trying to build a multi-billion-dollar music economy. We are swinging as hard as we possibly can for the fences. We want to make hundreds of thousands of musicians $50,000 a year through the distribution of music. As it stands, it's what, 20,000 musicians that are making that kind of money, and most of those are in music business rather than artists in the system. I would say that hundreds of gateways or thousands of gateways where people consume music through curated playlists by people that they know or who are influencers, that's one way. And distributing the income, millions of dollars of income, Harmonic taking a very small slice, and then the rest going to musicians and people who are actively engaged in the sort of value chain of distribution. And I really hope that we do genuinely have an open, decentralized internet accessible without gatekeeping, with decentralized front ends where people own the assets as they go from one place to another. That's really my hope, that you'll be able to take the token that you have of an album that you love, that you listen to our Harmonic Guild, and then in some video game you get into a car and it's that, because you have that token, that's what's playing on the car radio, like in those old GTA games where you uploaded it yourself. Those kinds of visions for the openness of the internet are what we're working for, and what sort of gets me up in the morning.
I like that idea. And
Absolutely.
with that, one of my favorite questions every time is, what's the craziest idea you thought about that could be a DAO or a DDAC or anything like that, or should be maybe, that you haven't seen yet?
I'm going to give you a canned answer of something we're working on rather than getting too deep into the weeds of my visions for decentralized organizations. Single purpose DAOs, single purpose DAO based smart contracts are a super powerful instrument. It's the first kind of step for network growth. If bands themselves are DAOs, right? An album itself is a DAO. It's a bunch of folks getting together who wants to make a certain sound, and that's what it is. And the album's done, and that DAO either continues in its tours or it's just that's what it is. And the fact that you can use DAO style smart contracts to allocate resources for small groups of people within a larger network of people is an incredibly powerful tool for team building to build anything.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was going to say, because you said something earlier, a label should be a DAO, right? There's DAOs which are buying basketball teams and Constitution, or trying to. So why not buy a label or start a label? I'm sure someone's working on it. But I like the breakdown of go from the label to the band and then go from the band to the album, right? Very cool. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Quinn, how do people get a hold of you and follow up?
Oh, for sure. So go to our website, fill out the form, and then you can probably set up a call with me pretty quickly. Our DMs are open on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. It's Harmonic Guild or Harmonic_Guild. And you can get in touch with us, hello@harmonicguild.io. But yeah, we should make it. We have a Telegram channel you can find. There's tons of different ways to get in touch with us. Do not be ashamed to send us an email if you're a musician or a dev or collaborator, external team with an NFT project that wants some additional utility. There's a ton of different ways we can work together. We're trying to be open and inclusive and break down the barriers for collaboration and distribution and promotion.
Perfect.
Amazing. All right, great. Yeah, this was fantastic, Quinn. Thanks for coming on the show. I had a blast hanging out. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Absolutely, for sure.
And that's a wrap. Spin and Solve are your hosts for DAO Deep Dives, a podcast about all things DAO. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.